Bankrupt off of $300 million a year in a publishing program, but $800 million in leveraged debt, which had nothing to do with the comic division.
Right.
So anytime anyone talks about Marvel's bankrupt in the 90s, and I got out while the getting was good, because I left Marvel in 95. I was on staff through then, I was writing for them through then, and then in 95 I left. And in 96 I became Acclaim's editor-in-chief because I wanted to be an editor-in-chief. I thought I was going to be editor-in-chief at Marvel, but it didn't happen. So Acclaim was asking me for a year, and I kept saying no for a year, and then I finally decided to do it, much to my chagrin. So I took that job in order to change the course of how I was approaching the work. I wanted to learn more about the business side of it because I'd just done so much writing for a 5-year span, that I wanted to write a little bit less and do a little bit more business. And the goal, of course, was to have a successful comic book publishing company that the parent company was a video game company, could leverage and make a lot of money off of the video games. Right. Unfortunately, our parent company happened to be Acclaim, which was a clusterfuck disaster area of a company, and even when they did good things like Turok, which was the most successful video game of its time on the N64 platform, if anyone remembers way back then, that Turok sold hundreds of millions of copies, and the Acclaim parent company still managed to fritter that away. It wasn't going to make a difference in our comic sales. The direct market was tanking, and our company's position in the direct market had tanked to a degree I hadn't even realized when I took the job. I learned real quickly what the retail market, direct market, thought of us. Right. So we were never really going to have a chance to sell comic books, even though I think we did some good ones. Ultimately, my job was to have content that could be extrapolated into video games, have video games be extrapolated into film and TV. We were just a little early. We were a few years early. We really were. The movie stuff didn't start happening till the early
now they have
aughts.
like Marvel one-offs and things like that, but in terms of the movies and stuff like that, that's a very common thing. But back then,
and they made video games of Shadow Man, Armorines, 3 or 4 Turok games, even a poorly conceived or selling video game like Shadow Man or Armorine still made a lot of money for Acclaim. So technically speaking, you couldn't sell a Shadow Man comic to save your life, 8,000 copies, but it's still making anywhere from $50 to $80 million in profit for the video game company. But it was all built on the lie, and I stopped lying. I took over the president of Acclaim Comics. Basically took his buyout early because he had sold the company when it was Valiant, and he took his buyout early and left after a little over a year of me being there, and I became president and publisher of Acclaim Comics. And after my very first solo budget, I said, this is completely all a lie. It's all built on lies. I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm not going to tell them what they want me to tell them and turn a blind eye to it. I'm not going to do that. And I said, these are the real numbers, this is the real reality, and we can't operate this way anymore as a business. And they said, okay, fine, that's the bitter pill we're going to swallow, but you have to close your New York operations down. And I said, then that's what we have to do, and laid off 21 out of 28 people and moved 7 over to the parent company's office to create, because they had to maintain some semblance of a publishing program for the $60 million they spent on the company. And I left after 4 months after that move. So I think we moved in March, and I was out the door by July or something like that. And I left on a Friday from Glen Cove, Long Island. I still remember in the rearview mirror, I'm driving home on a Friday, and I see the building behind me, and I'm saying, I'm never coming back to this building again. I had to go back like 3 weeks later for some paperwork shit. But on the way home, I made a couple calls to tell people that I'm out, I'm done, and that was it. And then on Monday, I got a call from Mark Powers, who was an editor at Marvel, saying, we want to launch a new Gambit book, and do you want to write it? And I said, okay, sure. I had no idea when I left Acclaim what I was going to do. None whatsoever. Actually, my second kid had just been born in the middle of closing the place down, so it was a wonderful stress diet. I recommend it. I lost 25 pounds. It was great. And I wanted to just hang a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I became a freelance writer again, and I had not necessarily planned for that, but there I was. I was a freelance writer again, and then I just kept doing that. For a few years until other things started to draw my interest outside of comics.
Right.
So now, and for the last 15 years, I've balanced a little bit of comic work, a whole bunch of intellectual property management work with a company in New York, and whatever odds and ends come up on a yearly basis, because something always comes up on a yearly basis that you don't expect.
Right.
So like 2 years ago, I did an animation project with Stan Lee and a licensing company in LA, which I never knew was going to happen when I'm planning for my year. That same company just called me up a week ago, which out of the blue said, do you want to talk about doing this? I said, we'll talk, and then we'll see if anything happens, but it wasn't planned for my quarterly. You got to plan what your year is going to be like when you're a freelancer. It wasn't planned for my fourth quarter budget. When you're working on Superman for DC,
right,
or X-Men for Marvel, it's a very, very different creature. And I could be doing 6 books a month for Marvel, which I was at the same time, and my approach and interactions on the New Warriors family of titles is completely different than on the X-Men titles. And so on a monthly basis, this is what I want to do in New Warriors, and I'll have to deal with the editor on certain things I know,
right.
And this is what I won't be able to do on X-Men. So why am I writing this plot when the whole thing's going to be changed, and I'm going to have to figure this out on a page-by-page basis. So every month it was a different thing at the same exact time.
Right.